Hey everybody, this is Peter with Tabletop Gaming Guild, and today we're going to be taking a delve into the role-playing game Heart, the City Beneath by Rowan, Rook, and Deckard. This is a game that takes place in the same world as Spire, the City Must Fall, but it is a separate role-playing game. Spire, the City Must Fall is about an uprising, a rebellion against the oppressors, where the players are going to be playing as Drow, the Dark Elves, versus the High Elves, the Alfir. But this is all about Heart, the City Beneath is all about diving into the obsessions of the player characters and the city that is beneath Spire. It's a dungeon down there, and there are all these locations, and the players are going to have to work their way through Heart to find these locations and to hopefully meet the goals that they have for themselves as they do so. It is a horror RPG, so there's a lot of very descriptive text about what goes on with these people and the problems that are there. It is a weird setting, so if you've ever watched a horror film, you kind of get the idea, the theme behind what's going to be happening in a game like this, where it's going to be unsettling at times, and so that can be a put off to some people. But we will go ahead and dive into the book to find out a little bit more about how the game is played, its setting, which is very odd and kind of open-ended. And then we'll come back up from the table and I'll give you my final thoughts on Heart, the City Beneath. So we're here to the table with Heart, the City Beneath by Grant Howitt and Christopher Taylor. Again, this is the same team that brought Spire, the City Must Fall. We can go ahead and read the back of the book to let us know a little bit about what we're going to get ourselves into with this book. Mages hooked on illegal magic, desperate for another hit, ruins ancient beyond reckoning, overgrown with bone and sinew, a sunken moon fecund and glorious that calls the faithful ever deeper, glyph-marked bees that swarm within you and seal your madness up with wax, downtrodden mercenaries bearing the weight of a lost regiment on their shoulders, regal witches who channel unearthly powers through their own diseased blood, vagabond knights wearing armor bristling with barely understood machinery, chthonic angels that sing a screeching, scraping song of rust and ashes, a red, wet heaven slumbering fitful under the city of Spire. This is the Heart, the City Beneath. Heart, the City Beneath is a tabletop role-playing game about delving into a nightmare undercity that will give you everything you've ever dreamed of or kill you in the process. It is a dungeon-crawling, story-forward tabletop RPG that focuses on what characters have to lose in pursuit of their dreams in the chaotic darkness beneath the world. Contained inside are rules for creating characters with curious abilities and frantic obsessions, full details of the strange subterranean world of the Heart, adversaries both horrific and pitiable to hunt or be hunted by, methods for mapping the unmappable and creating your own personal heart to explore, evocative and fascinating consequences for failure and misfortune that push the story onward, and pages of beautiful full-color art from Felix Mial. Learn more about the Heart RPG at rowanrookanddeckard.com. All right, so like we said, this is another book by Grant Howitt and Christopher Taylor, and it is a very interesting role-playing game, probably one of the odder, more weird role-playing game books I've ever read, and at the same time I'm very interested by. If you like the horror RPG genre, then this is going to be one that you're going to want to at least take a look at. And again, it's by Rowan, Rook, and Deckard, so you can check that out at their website. But we're going to go ahead and open it up now. We're going to flip through the book and see what we can learn about it. So our table of contents shows us that we've got an introduction, a how to play. We have some sections on the characters themselves and how to make a character, rules in detail here, and then we've got a section on running the game, the world of Heart, landmarks, adversaries, and then some appendices as well. Rowan, Rook, and Deckard does a great job of opening up their books with some information about safety tools that might be good to have at your table, especially in a game like this. I mean, I think they're great at all tables, but especially when you're playing a horror RPG, it's always a great idea to go over some safety tools, some ideas about what your table is what they are okay with at the table and things that they are not okay with at the table. And then if people aren't wanting to give any kind of generalities, or they don't want to give anything real specific, then they give you some ideas for how to handle that as well. And then they go over a little bit about some of the important concepts of the game and a word from the authors of the book as well. And they talk about here that the World of Heart is meant to be something that the games master can change a lot of or make their own. But they also do a really good job, especially towards the end of the book, giving you a lot of really good detail for the lore of the game and for the different places that the delvers in the game might go to. So a lot of room for malleability. A lot of games masters will want to probably like mix up things a little bit. But if you don't want to, there is still a lot of information in here that you could just pull straight from the book to run the game. So they get into the first part of right here, which is what is heart itself. And they give you three ideas, and then it's like three fleshed out ideas. And then they give you a list here of just a couple, like a sentence or so of other ideas as well. But it's so interesting. I've never really played a game so very different from Spire, where we had that single place, single location where the game was being run, and it's very fleshed out for you. This one, they want to leave it a little bit more open-ended for the games master. So you could pull one of these if you want to make the heart of the game, but at the same time, if you want to make it up yourself, they recommend that highly. So how to play, this is mostly for people who have not yet played role-playing games, but they have a little introduction for what players do and what game masters do. And then they get into a little bit more of the actual game itself. So like Spire, The City Must Fall, Heart, The City Beneath also uses the idea of resistances. They have Blood, which is for physical exhaustion, pain, blood loss, and injury. Echo for the twisting of the body and mind by the unreal engines of the heart, and Mind for madness, instability, and weirdness. Fortune for bad luck, incompetence, and overconfidence, and Supplies for loss of resources, damaged equipment, and debt. So they've got resistances here. The same thing they're going to be doing is that they had to inspire The City Must Fall is stress. And so as players take actions throughout the game, they will more than likely be gaining stress, and the stress will be allocated to one of these 5 resistances. And after each time they gain stress, the games master will be rolling to see if they have a fallout. And that is if the games master rolls a d12 and either meets or goes below the amount of stress currently gained by the player. And if they do, then they have a fallout, which we'll go over here in a little bit. But these are the 5 resistances in this game. They also continue, like Inspire the City Must Fall. They have a list of skills and domains. These skills and domains are very different, though, than Spire. And in this one, it is Compel, Delve, Discern, Endure, Evade, Hunt, Kill, Mend, and Sneak for the skills. And then for domains, we have Cursed, Desolate, Haven, Occult, Religion, Technology, Warren, and Wild. And this is going to be relevant to also the locations that they are delving into in the heart. And then they also have knacks, which is if you were to ever gain one of these a second time, then you gain a knack, which means you get to roll extra dice as well. So right here, they have in brief what I was describing to you a second ago, which is when you are going to take an action, you're going to be rolling from a dice pool of 10-sided dice or D10s. And whenever you take an action, you will automatically get to start with 1d10. Then if you have the relevant skill or a relevant skill that would go towards that action, you get another die. If you have a relevant domain, then you can roll another die. And then if you would happen to have mastery, or like I said, one of those knacks, then you would get another die. So at most, you can be rolling 4d10, and you're going to roll those, and you'll be taking your highest roll. But there will be difficulties for each of the actions you take. The games master will be deciding upon the difficulty, and the difficulty could be standard, risky, dangerous, or impossible. If it's standard, then whatever the highest roll is you get, then you'll take that. If it's risky, then you're actually going to remove your highest roll and take the next highest. If it is a dangerous roll, then you're going to remove the top 2 rolls and you'll be taking the third highest. And if it's impossible, then the idea would be that you can't actually succeed at the action, and so no roll is made. They do say, though, that if the player wants to, the player can go ahead and still automatically choose to do that action and fail, just because it might move the story forward in interesting ways. And this is very much a story-based game, a collaborative story being told between the players and the games master, to see where their characters go in Heart. To determine your success or failure here, you will refer back to this chart, which says if you roll a 1 as your highest roll, you have a critical failure and you'll be taking double stress. If you fail with a 2 to 5, then you're going to be failing and just taking a single stress. If you succeed with a 6 to 7, you succeed but take stress. 8 to 9 is also success and no stress, and then 10 is a critical success and increases your outgoing stress by 1 step. So that means you'll be doing some extra damage or stress to the person that you're going up against. There's just some extra information here about how you're inflicting stress and fallouts. So characters, you're going to be choosing some things. You'll be choosing from your ancestries and your callings and also your classes. So for ancestries in this game, you're going to have 4 to choose from, which again is different from the Spire City Must Fall, because in Spire the City Must Fall, everyone has to play a drow or a dark elf. In this game, you get to choose actually between the drow, the dark elves, or the Alfir, the high elves, humans, and gnolls. And we'll look at those in a second. Also, you'll be choosing from a calling, and the calling is the reason you are delving into the Heart, the City Beneath. So again, the idea here in this game is that you are delving beneath the city of Spire into the Heart. And the Heart is this very weird dungeon that lies beneath. And the further down you go, the weirder and more horrific it gets. So your delver, your character, will be choosing a calling, the reason they have been delving into the Heart. So here it says one of the callings is adventurer. You yearn for dangerous pleasures that the city above cannot provide. Enlightenment, seeking to achieve the impossible. You hunt for solutions in the Undercity. Forced, you have been coerced into coming down here against your will. Heart song, cursed with dreams of the heart, you delve in search of revelations. And penitent, you are seeking to atone for crimes you committed against your order. So you will be choosing your ancestry and your calling. And then you're also going to be choosing your class. And the class, there are a bunch of options. You have the cleavers, who are body-warping heart's blood hunters that consume their prey to fuel their terrible powers. The dead walkers, half-dead drifters with the keys to the back door of heaven. Deep apiarists, these are occultists who fill their bodies with glyph-marked bees and can manipulate reality. The heretic, zealots exiled from the city above for their faith, they seek the moon beneath. And hound, hard-bitten mercenaries with an undying legion of warriors at their back. Incarnadine, damned clerics of the hungry, cruel deity of debt. Junk mage, magic addicts with a direct line to entities slumbering in the depths. Vermisian knights, armored explorers and protectors of a cursed mass transit network. And witches, carriers of a blood disease that lets them reshape flesh and bone, loved and feared. So these are all the classes that you'll have to choose from. Each one of these classes and callings get their own page as we go forward. So here we go. We have the page for the drow or the dark elves. We have a page also for the humans, the Alfir or high elves, and gnolls. In the world of the Spire and Heart, It is mentioned that there is some racism that takes place, and that is the fact that the high elves are subjugating the drow, the dark elves. But they do mention in the opening of this book that they ask that nobody role play that within the game itself, because in Heart, it is not so much your ancestry that defines you, but where you're from and your not your ancestry, but your the city that you're from, not the people that you are a part of. So they're talking about not having racism within the game, even though they understand that in the Spire with the high elves and the drow, that's very prevalent in the city, but underneath in the Heart, it is not. The really cool thing, the first thing that I really love about Heart is when you choose your calling, you are also going to be gaining a list of minor beats, major beats, and zenith beats. This is probably the first mechanic that really kind of floored me about this game, and something that I'm very interested in seeing in play. And that is when you go into a session, your very first session, you're going to choose 2 of these beats from these lists, and these are going to be what you're trying to accomplish. Minor beats are usually something that can be accomplished usually within a single session. Major beats are things that you would probably be able to accomplish within 1 or 2 sessions. And then zenith beats it's kind of like your end goal. It's something that's going to take a while to accomplish. But you're going to choose before your first session. And then at the end of that session, you will choose which beats you want for your next session. So if you didn't end up completing any of these, then maybe you want to carry them over, or maybe you want to change those. But the idea is that this is something that is a secret between the player and the games master. And the games master can use this information to help plan out the session that you'll be going into next. I think these are really cool because the other idea is that these are what your advancement hinges on. When you complete a minor beat, you will gain a minor advancement. When you complete a major beat, you will gain a major advancement or ability. And then when you complete a zenith beat, you will gain a zenith ability. And these abilities can get pretty crazy as they get up. And again, with the zenith one, it's really like this is the end of the game for your character. Normally these zenith beats usually actually end up killing your character. So it is player driven almost as to when a character could possibly be calling it quits, retiring, or dying. So it's really interesting. Each of these beats are chosen by your calling, but then your abilities come into play when you choose your class. And so if we go on forward to the section on classes, we'll go ahead and open up the page for cleavers. You'll see here that you begin with core traits and 2 core abilities, but then also here is your list of minor abilities. And then you have major abilities. And then you have your zenith abilities. So each one of these classes has that list of abilities. And when you choose your class, you're going to want to take a look at those abilities and see what are some of the things that you might want to be able to do as you're pulling your character together. So you have your calling, which is going to give you your beats, the things that you are trying to accomplish. And then you have your class, which will give you your abilities that you're going to be gaining as you play through the game. And I think that's really, really cool idea. I like it a lot. It's somewhat similar to some of the Spire, The City Must Fall, but also a little different here with the beats. The beats is a very new thing. In Spire, it's when you make differences and you change the city, either for the better or for the good. When you make a change, then you advance. Here, as you begin to accomplish your specific goals, which again are secret between the player and the games master, you will begin to advance your character as you delve deeper into Heart. So we'll go ahead and flip through some of these pages real quick so you can see the art for some of these different characters, which gives me a great chance to tell you that I absolutely love the art in this book. It's very interesting, very thematic, This deep apiarist is probably one of my favorite pieces of art in the book. This is the class where your body is actually somewhat hollowed out, and you have these bees that live within you, and are part of your abilities, which I just think is so strange and different than anything I've ever seen before. You have the heretic, and you have the hound, the incarnadine, the junk mage, which I just think is another really cool piece of art here. We think of a magic wielder. It's not something that I would normally imagine, for sure. The Mermisian Knight, which is probably the class I would want to play, to be totally honest, at least first. And then we have the Witch. And so everyone, like I said, every one of these is going to come with core traits. They're going to give you a skill and a domain that you're, focused on. And then you have your resources, you have equipment, and your core abilities to start with. And then you get your, you can read through all the options that you'll have for minor and major abilities and zenith abilities. So the next section here goes into the rules in a little bit deeper detail. We had that kind of overview at the beginning of the book, but this goes into more details on figuring out the rules, about applying difficulty, creating your dice pool, which again, I think that little rundown that we had earlier gives us a good idea. The applying of difficulty is going to be the games master. They do really, though, say that as the players take their actions, the games master is going to want to be very clear as to the difficulty before the player actually takes the action. And with the games master choosing the difficulty ahead of time, then the player actually has the chance to back out of taking that action if they would like. And I think that's a really interesting idea, because normally they choose the action, they roll, and it's just over in most of the role-playing games I've played before. But here it's a discussion happening between the player and the games master about the action they think that their delver is going to take, and then set the difficulty and decide, do I really want to do this? Is it really worth the possibility of stress? Because stress is pretty crazy, and that's what we're going to get into now. So as the players begin to take actions and possibly fail, they will gain stress again towards these different items here, either the blood, the echo, the mind, the fortune, or the supplies resistances. And each time they take stress, then the games master will check for fallout. So if they only have a total of 2 stress, and again, that's adding each of these up, seeing if they have any stress. If they only have 2 stress, the games master will be rolling a d12 to decide if they go into fallout or not. And as long as the games master rolls above their total number of stress, then everything's fine. They're not going to fall out. But as soon as the games master rolls equal to or less than their total value of stress, then fallout happens. And fallout can get pretty crazy in the game. If the roll equals a fallout and it's 1 or 6, then they're going to take 1 through 6, then they're going to take minor fallout. And if it's a 7 through 12, then they'll be taking a major fallout. And there is such a thing as a critical fallout, but that only happens once you take a second major fallout, and the games master will then be combining those 2 major fallouts to equal a critical fallout. And there are examples of fallouts throughout the book, giving the games master some ideas for which type of resistance the fallout was part of. So we'll get to that here in just a little bit. But next, they do have a single page here. That's it. Yep, single page that talks about combat, because combat is something that they also say, it is inevitable that there will be combat in the game, but at the same time, it should be a little bit more rare than in a lot of role-playing games. In this game, combat can be pretty deadly, pretty quick, and they also want to see players and games masters going through the game, telling a story, not so much focused on killing, even though it will take place for sure in the game. So they give you some ideas here. There is range, there's melee and ranged and extreme range. They do say that if you are going to have combat, then it's going to be rolls with the kill skill, and then so in combat, they're going to be rolling for the kill skill plus the domain that the fight is taking place in. You can use some other ones that you're talking about, specifically maybe hunt or evade skills, and they give you ideas on how the other skills might be used in combat, but they do say that the majority of time you'll be using the kill skill, and again, plus the domain that the combat is taking place in. There is no real initiative, the idea being that it should be obvious when combat begins who probably should be taking the first action. And then you can choose to either go around the table, or the person who takes the turn then chooses the next person. And in between each of those people, if the games master will be controlling any possible actions that their NPCs might be taking as well. So again, we talked about Fallout and the types of Fallout that there are. There's minor, major, and critical Fallout, but then there's also the idea with these Fallouts, there's usually going to be an immediate Fallout or an ongoing Fallout. And so an immediate is there's just automatically something that happens once the character takes Fallout. When they take Fallout, if they were taking Fallout in their blood resistance, then after the Fallout has happened, then all the stress that they had beside that resistance is just gone. It's wiped out at that point, and they're starting from scratch in that specific resistance. If they were to take a major Fallout, then after the outcome is done, then all resistances, all stress is wiped out from all resistances, and you're starting with a completely blank slate. So there are the immediate Fallouts, and then there are ongoing Fallouts, and then there are some very rare Fallouts that have both immediate and ongoing effects. So they give you a list here of minor Fallout in the blood resistance, in the mind resistance, echo, fortune, supplies, and then they also give you the major Fallout options here for each of those resistances. And then, as I stated previously, if you were to end up getting 2 major Fallouts, then you'll be getting a critical Fallout, which usually involves your character dying in some incredible way. So that is Fallout. There are resources in the game, and the resources have values, and those values are dice numbers, so like D4 all the way up to D12, and those items, those are the values for those items. So items in the game you might be able to use for bartering or trading or purchasing things, as well as they're given values so that you know what die to roll if you end up needing to do that for those items. You have your regular equipment that you might have for your delver. There are going to be weapons involved. They're called kill equipment. There's delving equipment, and then any additional equipment. And again, those all have some definitions as well as dice involved with them as well. I kind of liked this real quick as well, the optional rule for equipment slots. If you were wondering about kind of encumbrance in this game, this is just an optional rule that you might be able to employ, where each player has so many equipment slots, and once those equipment slots are full, then they would have to start choosing between what do they want to carry. And again, it's only for things that are of a value of D6 or higher. So those smaller items, the D4 items, you don't have to count those towards your equipment slots. But I thought that was a pretty interesting optional rule if you are interested in that, because I know a lot of games that are dungeon delving like this one is usually used to focus a lot on how much a player could carry. And so this is just an interesting optional rule to employ kind of the same idea, but hopefully be a little bit easier for people to track. So there's more information here about equipment and the buying and selling of equipment. And then there's a single page here talking about tags that go with equipment. Each piece of equipment might have tags accompanying it, and these are the definitions for each of those tags and how they may benefit you when using that equipment. This is a page that you're going to want to keep handy. It does come with a, the book comes here with a little ribbon. This is one of those pages that you might want to keep marked in some way, whether you're using the ribbon or you put a little sticky note in here. Maybe you're going to make a copy of this and have it at the table, because it will come up as players utilize their equipment and they see a tag. They're going to want a quick reference for the tags with their items. Bonds are rules for relationships that the Delvers make with the people they come across while they journey through Heart. And then we get into the exploration mechanics for exploring Heart itself. So again, Heart is a very weird and odd place. There are locations that are considered to be of importance where people have started to make small villages or towns or cities within Heart itself. And those places are usually considered landmarks. And it's kind of like a point of light location, because in between each of these landmarks, it's difficult for travel. And there is a travel mechanic that happens in this game as well that we'll go over. But Heart itself is broken up into multiple tiers. Tier 0 is the very bottom of the spire. And there's a place called Derelictus, and that could be considered part of Tier 0. So you're still almost in the city itself. You're not quite into Heart yet. And then Tier 1 is the city in between. So this is the city directly beneath the spire. And you're starting to get into Heart itself. There's a lot more people here and cities, because this is where most people end up stopping. Most people do not travel or delve all the way down into the center of Heart, whatever that center is. They stop just here in Tier 1. And so all of these locations are going to be a little bit more normal, though weird, a little bit more normal than everything you're going to find as you continue going deeper into Heart itself. Tier 2 is where more weirdness and creepiness creeps into things. So you're going to run into more monsters here. There's going to be fewer probably people here. There's still going to be landmarks and locations, but the people that live there are going to be fewer, and they're going to be odder, and they're going to be weirder as you go into them. And then Tier 3, it says weirdest rules here, and gravity and time and standard spatial interactions are no longer guaranteed. And things are just very, very strange. It says even alien skies may be glimpsed through stained glass windows. So it gets to the point in here where I start to struggle a little bit myself as a games master, because you're going to want to be able to give off very good and evocative descriptions, and that's not somewhere where I really excel. And so I'm probably gonna have to be making notes ahead of time for some of the places that are down here in Tier 3. And then Tier 4 is the Heart itself, and it states here specifically that you cannot come back from here, and if you do, you are not the same person who entered it. And so Tier 4, as you see, each one of these has some places, locations in italics. And that's because these reference landmarks that are going to be in the farther part of the book. But Tier 4, there's none of that, because you have now reached the essence of Heart, the center of Heart, and you will either not be coming back, or you may be someone completely different if you do. So they don't give you actually any locations in Tier 4. Delving is what happens when the Delvers journey from one landmark to the next. And they do have here rules for completing a delve, and this is really interesting because each of these each of these spaces in between are when they're delving, you have an example delves, and these delves have domains, and they have a tier, so where they're going to be located in heart, and then they also have stress and resistance, and then here are some events and connection. And the resistance is interesting because it's almost like hit points for the delve itself. And so as you're playing through the game, as you're going through the delve, you're going to be explaining to the players what it is they're seeing, what they're coming across as they delve between landmarks. And then they're going to be giving you ideas. They're going to be taking actions to make it past this delve, to get beyond this delve to the next landmark, the next location they're trying to get to. And when they take those actions, they're going to be taking the actions and they're going to be rolling against the resistance of the delve itself. And when they reach, when together as a whole, reach the number or go beyond or exceed the resistance number of the delve, then they have completed their journey. But if for some reason they cannot hit that resistance number, maybe they have to abandon the delve. This gets into abandoning the delve and having to turn back and return from where they came. And again, each of these actions, each time they're taking these actions, this isn't just rolling dice and saying, yes, I succeeded. It's telling a story back and forth between the player and the games master, because that's what's going to flesh out the world, and that's going to tell you how things change. And the big thing here is they tell the games master, if your player fails, you don't just say they fail and that's it. You want to continue the story. You need to tell how they failed, why they failed, so that you can really flesh things out and have it make more sense to them. The map itself, there is an example map in the back here. It's not one that you have to use, but it's something that can be used. We have Spire way up here. And then we have tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and then we have our tier 4 where it's the center of heart. And you can be using these hexes to fill in what are the landmarks they are finding and how can they get from one to the next when they're delves. This is something that the games master could fill out ahead of time if they want to, but the recommendation is that the games master maybe come up with a couple of landmarks here in tier 1 based off of where their players' characters are coming from and their goals, so the goals in the game. And then as they complete these and they decide to delve further, then slowly start to fill these out so that they have more say in where they're going and where they're journeying, rather than it being something that's completely fleshed out ahead of time. But they know that that is something that a lot of people will do because that's a bit more normal and easier, maybe even for Games Master. But at the same time, they want the players to really have a feel for helping to find and delve into heart. And so they get into that here in this section about the map and running the game as well. So the running the game section, they give you some very general but really good tips for running a role-playing game. And then after that, they begin to get more into the specifics for running heart itself. They give you a lot of really great tips, questions to ask, reusing setting details that you come across as you play the game. Make sure you're taking notes as you play. So it says the most important thing to remember here is when the players do something, the world should change as a result. So the same thing I was saying here, whether they're successful in their tasks or they fail, something should be changing as a result of that. Talk about evoking the atmosphere here, and they talk about the wonder, the tragedy, humanity, and inhumanity of heart, and they talk about the horror of heart. This set here I thought was really, really pertinent, and so I wanted to go ahead and actually read this aloud. We tell ourselves that we are sacred spaces. We protect and venerate our flesh. We assert dominance over it. We are apart from the world, and our minds and bodies are our domains. In a world with few sanctuaries, our bodies and brains are ours to control and shelter inside. Horror tells us absolutely not. Our bodies are not our own. We are viable, imperfect, fragile creatures, temporary smears of upstart electric meat. Our minds can be shattered and reforged, turning us against ourselves. The world is huge and complex and beyond our control. Our bodies can be pierced and slashed and burned or infected and corrupted. There is no safety to be had, and nothing is certain. So I thought that was incredibly evocative language, specifically the part here where they say temporary smears of upstart electric meat. That was some good writing. And at the same time, it reminds me why horror is not my preferred genre when it comes to role-playing games. But I have played some and I do find them very interesting. And I think this is going to be one of those really, really unique gaming experiences when I get around to playing it. So they continue to play, talk about play throughout here, especially they get into the callings and the beats of the characters and how it's very important to their character arcs, meeting those beats and then eventually getting to the zenith beats in a good death. And so there's a lot of really great information in here for the games master as they get things ready to play. They do talk about the ability of running a one-shot game in Heart with some minor adjustments, but they expect that you'll probably be playing a game anywhere between 2 to probably 8 sessions. They don't expect Heart to be a game that just goes on and on for years like a lot of role-playing games possibly could, because the idea here is that the players are going to be hoping to hit those beats, and as they hit those beats, gain their abilities and eventually hit that zenith ability. So it's just the story that Heart is meant to tell is a story that goes forward rather quickly, and again is a horror story, which is going to usually involve the party dying, but in some grand way. Gets into a little bit about creating non-player characters, a little bit more about combat and the idea that combat is not always balanced, and then it gets into the landmarks and the delves. So all of that gives you some ideas on running the game, and they do talk a lot about how Heart is meant to be played around with and adjusted by the games master themselves, but they do give you a good bit of stuff here for the setting. And so me personally, I would be using most of the stuff that they have here because I think it's very fleshed out, very well done. A lot of good lore that's mentioned inside the sections on landmarks. And so we're going to go ahead and get into that. They talk a little bit about art and religion and some of the major organizations that are here in Heart. They get a little bit into the geography of Heart as well, and the geography of the individual domains that are here in Heart. And then they get into landmarks, and there is a ton of landmarks in here. Really interesting things to read, and they give you the domains that they are a part of, again, what tier they take place in Heart, the default stress, that's the die that would be rolled for actions taken in these places, and then possible things throughout there. So in the landmarks, you're going to find you have here some information on making your own landmarks if you would like to, and then making your own delves, and then information about the different tiers. But each one of these landmarks is really well fleshed out. They give you a good couple paragraphs about each one, potential plots that take place, any special rules that might be in that landmark itself, and then the possible resources that can be found there. And there are landmarks, like we said here, in Tier 1. I think they've got something like 11 different landmarks in Tier 1. Tier 2 has, I believe, around 15 different landmarks that your players may come across while delving through Heart. And then Tier 3 also has quite a few landmarks, as you can see, for them to possibly come across. So lots of different information in here for these landmarks and the locations. Really good information on the delves. And then after all of that, we get into the adversaries. And so these are some of the creatures that your players may come across in the game itself. And each one of these adversaries is given some description here, and they're given a motivation, which I think is fantastic. Some descriptors as well. So as you're trying to describe them to your players, as well as they have some really nice pieces of art for them as well. Each one of them still has a resistance number, so the same as when the players are delving. As they play against these adversaries, these creatures, they'll be trying to reach this resistance number, to exceed it, in order to defeat these adversaries. Now, there are quite a few normal or regular adversaries, even though each one of them is pretty nuts in and of themselves. But if that's not enough, then they also have, let's see where it's at here. They have legendary adversaries. And so these are creatures that are probably going to be towards the end of a campaign, kind of a big boss creature, if you will, if that is what you want to throw at your players. You're going to be choosing from amongst these. And I believe there are 5 different kind of end boss legendary adversaries. And then at the very end here, we have another rules summary of the whole book itself. We have the map that we looked at just a little bit ago. And then here at the very end, we have the character sheet. So that is Heart, the City Beneath. It is probably, like I said, one of the weirder, most different role-playing games that I've ever read through, but tons of really interesting ideas and mechanics. We're going to go ahead and come up from the table, and I will give you my final thoughts on Heart, the City Beneath. Okay, everybody, we're back up from the table, and we just finished looking through Heart, the City Beneath, and this is a very interesting, weird game. Having read through it, but it's also one that I'm really looking forward to diving more into and eventually getting to play with some of my friends. It's a horror RPG, which is not normally the kind of game that I play. I play just a lot of the high fantasy role-playing games, but this one is so open-ended in some ways that I think it's going to be pretty cool. I love that like Spire, it is a story-driven role-playing game where it's very much part of the game that you want the players to be discussing with the games master what action it is that they want to take, what the fallout of each of those, what the consequence could be of each of those actions, whether it's detrimental or good, and that you're changing the world as you go. I love the idea of the delving mechanic, where in between these landmarks, there's going to be something happening to the players, and they have to, by their actions, either complete the delve to the next landmark, or possibly even have to abandon the delve and head back to safety. I think that's a really interesting mechanic. But I think the thing that I really love the most is that each of the callings that the players choose from have these minor, major, and zenith beats. I think it's a really cool idea for advancement, because where a lot of games have advancement being experience points, which is usually focused on going out and killing creatures or gaining treasure or whatever the story may be to advance their character. Here you have these beats that your character is trying to accomplish because it's why they're here to begin with. And I love that each session you're choosing different beats possibly to try to accomplish, and that those beats are a secret between you and the games master, and that helps the games master design the next upcoming session as they get the secret beat from each of their players, and then they can use that to choose maybe from some of the landmarks or the delves, or creating their own to lead those players towards those beats. And when you hit those beats, then all of a sudden being able to advance your character with their abilities, all leading up to those zenith abilities that the players may be able to get to. The tug of war that takes place with taking actions and gaining stress and then having the possibility of fallout. I love that as well. So a lot of really cool mechanics happening here. And so I personally am looking forward to giving it a shot, trying it out, even though horror RPGs are not normally my favorite. This game came out in 2021 and won a ton of awards that year from the Ennie Awards. So if you're somebody who follows games that win a lot of awards and you want to try them out, this is definitely one you're going to want to try out because I think it won 7 awards in 2021 in the role-playing games. So you're definitely going to want to check this out. And if you do, you're going to head over to rowanrookanddecker.com. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. I hope that it helped you decide whether or not you're interested in checking out this game. And if you like the video, give it a like, maybe subscribe to the channel, check out all the other videos that we're making. And until we talk again, everybody, keep on playing games.